Alright, and welcome to another Conquest Corner here from Trainkickers Podcast. On this particular episode, we are going to be going through our first character in terms of these reviews, deep dives, however you might want to call it. In particular, we're going to go to the Fallen Divinity. This is something that was requested. It's something I know I would like to think reasonably well, something I actually run. So I think this is a good spot because we've also talked about the units that she can bring, so now's a really good time to get to her. So, as a reminder for anyone, if this is the first time watching this, we're going to go through, discuss everything all about her. For this one, the difference is going to be is we're actually going to do some list building as well. At least I'm going to discuss some list ideas that I have. And all of this is for Conquest, The Last Argument Kings from Parabellum Games. Especially now with Warhammer Fantasy starting to come out, or depending on time, maybe it's already out of this. This is the game I want to play. This is my rank and flank sort of game. Absolutely love it. And going through these is honestly a pleasure. So I'm really enjoying this. You will have seen from the screenshot, if you looked on YouTube, of my Fallen Divinity that I painted up because I put that up there. So I've been running her now, I don't know, 12+ times, as well as tons of theory crafting and all of that. So not saying that I'm perfect to talk about this, but I think I know quite a bit, so I'd like to be able to discuss it. If you are looking to pick this model up or any other model, keep in mind that we do have a code for you. Terrain Kickers is the code. There's also in the notes below this, gives you a link you can click on. You put that code in, you save yourself 10%. You help us out as well. Those sort of things are, really do help keep the lights on running around here and help us be able to improve the things that we want to do. I think that's it for the moment. So why don't we get into this? So I know that if you're watching, the screen might be a little bit off, but I think it works best because when we pull up another unit, this is the sort of view that works quite well for this. This one's a little bit different, so we're going to talk through sort of the base level things, the sort of things she takes, stats, and what changes you go through the tiers, and then we're going to get into really how those tiers change. All right, so when we take a look at this, for what the Fallen Divinity can take, it only has mainstay options. It's either Buccephaloi, the Kentarch Karyatids, the Kanephors, or Karyatids. So 3 out of those 4 that we've talked about. I haven't talked about the Centaurs, but honestly, they're not out yet, so I don't really have a lot of experience with them. I would like to proxy them, just so I can get some more shots at them and the other Centaur, the Paramai, just so I can try them out and get a better feel for them. But personally, with 3 out of the 4 of the options, I think you're fine running those ones. I don't think you're necessarily missing so much out by not having it available to you. All right, so Fallen Divinity works a little bit different than all the other, essentially everything in the game, because it does have these 3 tiers. So you're going to start at tier 1, and there's ways to increase your tiers. So I was going to do this the other way, but maybe we'll talk about the base way that you change tiers, and then we'll get into what other things that means later. So keep in mind that if you are playing Old Dominion, that if you have this model, you actually have another power pool. So normally, you only have one that you actually care about. So normally, the only one that you actually care about is the Dark Power Pool. So just as a brief reminder of this, that you start at tier 1, you don't hit tier 2 until you get to 9 tokens. Remember, you're getting tokens from losing stands that have Animate Vessel. There is, Dark Shepherd that could take out stands, so gaining it the same way, but another way to get them without your opponent having to do it. As well as the Hierodeacon has a spell that can get you these as well. You also, at the start of every round, if your Warlord is on the table, you gain one as well. That is your Blasphemous Soma, which used to be an upgrade, now it's a freebie. When you get to 18 tokens, then you're at tier 3. Tier 4 is 23 or better, but you have to have essentially a Ziliarch or the Strategos be your Warlord. That's not going to be the thing because she must be your Warlord, so we don't care about tier 4 here. The one you're used to is the Dark Power Pool. That's the one that ups essentially your units. The Fallen Pantheon is the one that you're going to be using, at least to some extent for this. You're not taking her if your goal isn't to get here to tier 3. Minimum tier 2 and realistically tier 3 by some point. We'll talk about how to balance between the two and should you be trying to do a little bit of both and how to kind of look at that. So when you get to tier 2, so if you have 9 of those tokens, then the Fallen Divinity goes to tier 2. You do get some other bonuses, and it mentions that bonus right here. Other friendly regiments with the Animate Vessel special rule that are within 10 inches get +1 to their attacks. If you can get to that 18 tokens, then for your your Fallen Pantheon piece, then she goes to tier 3. For these tiers, if she gets to tier 3, if they start with their animate vessel, they start within 10 inches, then they get +2 to their attacks. Dauntless. Dauntless means you can never break and always count as inspired. So it sort of gives you some of those tier 3 bonuses, with the downside that when another friendly regiment ends its activation within 10 inches of her, it takes 4 wounds. So doing this and ending anywhere close to her to get those bonuses will actually also start hurting your units. She's essentially just sucking in all of this power. A few other things to realize. When she goes to tier 2, she's going to heal 4 wounds. When she goes to tier 3, she's going to heal 6 wounds. So she keeps her number of wounds she has, and then she heals up, because we're going to see her profile. She gets more wounds as she goes. All right, let's talk through the base profile and how it changes between the tiers. So she starts at a move of 4. That's going to increase by 2 per tier. So tier 2 is 6. By tier 8, she's moving 8 inches. 4-inch move is awful. She's exceedingly slow. Her volley and clash are both at 2s, but those will go up by 1 every single time she goes to another tier. So she can actually end up at 4s for those 2 stats, which means that if she gets inspired by charges and things like that, that she ends up rerolling 6s. Remember, inspired can't get you to above a 4, it just makes you reroll 6s. She starts at 8 attacks, goes to 10, goes to 12, so gains 2 attacks per tier. Wounds, she gains 2 wounds going to tier 2, 3 wounds going to tier 3. So she's 10 wounds to start, gets the 12, gets the 15, because it's 3 above that. Remember though, when she gets to tier 3, she doesn't reset the 15 wounds. However hurt she is, she's that hurt, but then you heal 6. That is a lot of healing. Even getting to tier 2 healing that 4, that is a lot of healing, and we're going to talk about other ways to get a little more healing for her as well. No resolve, of course. You're undead, you don't care about that. Starts at defense 2 and evade 3. The defense goes up by 1 per tier, and the evade goes down by 1 per tier. So in the beginning, she's rather protected, because evade 3, you're going to have your evade. So she's going to essentially ignore half of the things that swing at her. And she has some other rules that help out with that as well. But as she goes down, goes along, her evade will go down, but her defense starts getting higher, as well as she has hardened, and that goes up and up. So her chances of getting her very good defense go up drastically. So what does she have at all levels? 1, she always has blessed. Keep in mind, blessed is before you roll dice, either on attack or defense. You take a choice, and you get to reroll any misses. Because it's a defensive save, not characteristic, you can take it on the evade if you wish. Other things she has at all points, of course, is animate vessel. She is always terrifying. Her terrifying gets stronger. She starts at terrifying 1, and every tier she becomes 1 more scary. So that means by tier 3, at terrifying 3, assuming you're affected by terrifying, assuming you don't have one of the rules that would stop it or something like that, you're not really going to have much of resolve at all, because your resolve is theoretically best, we're assuming not, an unbelievable large unit or something crazy. Your resolve, if you're super amazing, could be like a 5. -3, you're down to a 2. If you're much less, you might not have a resolve stat. One of the other things she has at all levels is Font of Dark Power. Font of Dark Power just says that when you generate tokens naturally, you can choose to put in a Dark Power pool or Fallen Pantheon pool. If you're within 10 inches of her, and it can go up depending on the tier she's in, that it must go to the Fallen Pantheon pool. I want to say it's at tier 2 that, it goes to 14 inches. So it actually goes up by 4 when you hit tier 2. The other thing she has at all points, of course, is a supremacy ability. Her supremacy is always active. Essentially, all her supremacy says, it's a big old paragraph. But what this supremacy really says is that she must be your warlord. We know you only take 1 that's on her rules, but she is your warlord. That she's a character stand, but she's also a monster regiment, and she's a monster regiment by herself. She doesn't join other things. She's hanging out there alone. She gets her 2 actions as a regiment would. She can take all of the actions that a regiment can. However, since she's also a character, she is allowed to duel. She's not allowed to refuse duels. Once you start getting to tier 2, absolutely true for tier 3, but at least if you get to tier 2, people probably won't be challenging you. By tier 3, no one's going to challenge you. It is not affected by the dark power pool, though. So it doesn't get the auto-inspire, all those sorts of things. None of that happens here. Can't join any other regiments, and it does not have to have a mono regiment in its band to be there. You don't need any other regiments itself, so we know she only has mainstay options. You don't actually have to take any of them if you don't want. You could just take her without any of the others. Me personally, I always do, but you're not actually required to do that. So that gives us a little bit of an overview of her, say, base stats. And as it makes sense, the higher power that she gets, the better her stats get. Let's talk about some of her special rules that vary. As you go up in tier, everything improves except your evasion. That's it. Everything else gets better, and it tends to get better by about 1 each. So cleave goes up by 1 each time. So you start at cleave 1. Hardened goes up by 1 each time. So like we said, this is a model, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, of how fragile it can be in the beginning. But this is a model that at higher levels, if you have hardened 3, then that means you're ignoring up to 3 of their cleave. That's about as good as it gets, which means you should be on your 4 defense, unless they're doing like a flawless strikes or something else crazy. You're probably on your best defense. You start at impact hits 4, goes 5, no, the impact hits only goes up by 1 between tier 2 and then stays the same at tier 3. So you only get the 5 impact hits. Wasn't sure. She always has flank. Flank means if you want her in turn 1, you can absolutely have her. Remember, she's your warlord, so her being on the board means she can start powering up because Blasphemous Soma. It also means if you want to delay her for a round to get someone else to start her up a little further, because she is move 4, she is very slow, that is an option. Her terrifying, like we said, goes up by 1 each time. She gets brutal impact at higher levels. I think it's just, level 3, she has brutal impact 3. That's the only time she actually has brutal impact. Also, what happens at higher levels, that at tier 2, she gets unstoppable. She doesn't lose it at tier 3. She keeps that rule, but she does become unstoppable. She also gains tenacious at tier 3. Tenacious, 1 failed save is a success. So when you have a very good defense and one of your saves is a success, you're not going anywhere. Don't believe she has that at lower levels. One of the more recent times I played her, it was a very small points game we were doing, so she essentially got to tier 3 after like 2 turns. So I kind of just had tenacious the whole battle. I believe that is all the pieces. I don't think I missed anything. All right. So let's talk through just her in general. Then we'll get into a little bit more things like that. Okay. So for this lady in general, she is obviously at her most fragile early. That is the time, if your opponent can get to her, they will. If your opponent can take her down, that's when they will. You can't let them take you out at tier 1. Tier 1, you're not super survivable. If you really look at it, evade 3 is good. 10 wounds is good. Blessed, you're probably going to have to more use your blessed on defense usually early on, I find, if they can get to you. The reason being is you don't want her to be taking tons and tons of wounds. There are units that can easily take her out. Remember, you're looking at, Jotnar sort of stats. You're looking at dinosaur sort of stats, those sort of things. And how many times have you run in with something hard, hit that thing, and just wiped it? So, if someone has heavy cav unit coming into her, those sort of things will become issues. And those are the sorts of units that will get to you. So some of the others might not be able to, but if they have some medium units that can really get some movement, I'm thinking, some of the units from 100 Kingdoms. I'm thinking Triceratops from Wadroons. I always forget the name of the actual ones, but that's essentially what they are, at least what I see them as. If you're looking at those sort of things, that can become a problem for her. Tier 1 you want to be careful with. Also, with only a move of 4 means it's going to be tough to get your charges, because move 4, no unstoppable. Which means until you get to tier 2, she's going to have a hard time actually getting to people, usually. Which means they might get to her first. And, with only a 4 plus a d6, your charge ranges aren't really that great anyway. And the last thing you want this model to do is, to lose out on any of that, because impact 4 with no brutal impact isn't going to do you any good. especially when you're on a base clash of 2. Keep in mind, if your dart power pool is higher, she's not affected by it anyway. So she needs to be charging to get the inspired. Because if you pay attention to the piece here, even at higher tiers, it's other friendly regiments and so on. She does not inspire herself. She has blessed, which is very good as well, of course. But early on, I'm using it for defense. I need her to survive. The hardened one can help, but you're probably just taking the evade 3. Rerolling that means you should save about 75% of the wounds. That's really good. You don't take resolve, so they really have to dedicate to some power to you. Also, let's face it, with your slower move, since it'll take a little bit longer for you to get a little further up the field, might mean that you're out of their range a little bit longer than you might with a unit that's moving at, say, even a 5 or a 6 or something like that. If you're greatly worried about what they can do, say they have tons of long-range shots or long-range magic, that might be the case that you keep her out. Auto, flank, choose to keep her out that first turn. Let her come in next, so that way there's one less turn of that sort of issue. Although, since she's your Warlord with that Blasphemous Soma, I kind of do prefer her to come in early to start getting that extra power. Alright, so, got to do things early, I feel, to keep her going. Once you start getting to tier 2, now you can start running a little more wild. 1, you'll heal up if you've been hurt. So hopefully if you haven't been like horrendously massacred, you should be pretty close to at least 10 wounds or maybe in your full 12. Your defense has now gotten better. You're at hardened 2, so you're probably usually at 3s on your defense. So you're still saving 50% of the time. You still have blessed, but now you're going to start hurting people more. Because now you have more impact. You have your unstoppable, so at least you get to reroll your charges, so you have much more likely to actually get in. Move 6 means that 6 plus that d6, much more consistent. With that, you're looking at on average probably closer to 10 on each charges. I said that blessed, now I don't mind using offense if I can get the charge into the unit and they're the type of unit that I can put good damage into. With 10 attacks and cleave 2, there's quite a few units that you can put decent damage into. Now also at terrifying 2, which means that the resolve stat's going to be worse. If I could put good damage in, then I'm going to use blessed on offense. If I'm still worried about how much output they can do, or if I'm low on wounds, I will save the blessed for my defense. Again, you're probably on 50-50 saves, but turn it to 75% with blessed is really going to help out. All right, by the time you get to tier 3, should you be able to get to tier 3, were you cagey enough to be able to get there? This is the toughest thing in the game, nigh unstoppable in many ways. You're at defense 4 now with hardened 2. Sorry, I remember if I said before if the hardened kept going up by 1. It was only hardened 2 at this point. I'll check and make sure I didn't say that. If so, I'll correct it. But you're going up, you're now at hardened 2. So you're now essentially always on defense 4s. You're now saving 2/3 of the time, and if you really were worried about it on your defense, you still have blessed. You could essentially save almost everything. Not absolutely everything, but pretty close to it. They're really going to have to get creative with what they do to take her down, because 1, you got to this level, you healed again. 2, the units around her are getting injured, but getting stronger in general because of the sorts of rules that you're giving them. And if they don't have ways to ignore your defense, so like I said, things like flawless strikes, or, even if they have a cleave of 3, you're fine. So you yourself now are on 12 attacks. You have cleave 3. That means most things, not everything, but most things in this game, if they don't have an evade stat, aren't getting a save, or they're getting a save of about a 1, because average evade stat's probably a 1. Maybe they're getting 2s if they have good evades. You now can be impact with brutal impact. So you're getting 5 of those on 4s, brutal impact, and if you get your charge in, now you have 12 attacks on 4s rerolling 6s. If you want to do blessed, you're rerolling everything, because you're rerolling your 5s then at that case. So you're looking at, realistically, most things hitting. You're probably averaging about 10 or so hits. If they don't have a good evade stat, they might be on 1s. There's a chance they don't have a save at all. There's been tons of times I've run into things with a cleave value of 3 and people aren't getting saves, or they're at most getting like a 1 on a save, which means they're probably on average taking 7 to 8 or maybe a little bit more wounds. Again, we're going to play with just nice and easy numbers. You are now also at terrifying 3, which means if their resolve stat isn't good enough, they're not really getting anything there either. So whatever you hit them for, you're looking at almost the same amount in terms of wounds from resolve. So you're almost doubling whatever it is that you actually get into them. So there's a lot of damage that can be output here. I paused briefly there for a second because I wanted to review Resolve just to check some of the wording. Resolve is your dice that are at the level or below. It's not listed as an auto 1 success for Resolve the way they say it, which means if you can get them to be Resolve 0, they just fail everything, much like they would for defense, the way it's worded. At some point, maybe that'll change. But for right now, yeah, you can just get through everything then. So your key here is to get to tier 3. If you can get to tier 3, this thing is going through whatever you want to aim it at. Like I said, you have ways to help protect yourself a little bit if you want, but otherwise just go out there and have some fun, because you're going to have a lot of fun. So let's talk about blessings that you can take, and then we'll get into list builds. Remember, now this thing's already 300 points. Also keep in mind, it is a light, which means it comes in, say, turn 1 or turn 2. But it is also a monster. Light monsters do score objectives. They count as 2 bases. So, for things you could take, you can take the Kentarch. For this, for 40 points, when you get the Dark Power pool, that's the other pool to tier 2. Character stands and friendly regiments in 8 inches are always inspired. If you get here to tier 3, she'll give everyone within 10 inches inspired essentially anyway, because she gives them Dauntless. Not a great upgrade for her. The best upgrade for her, I feel, is Aura Malice. Now, it is 40 points. But normally it's, hey, that regiment that the character has it on gives dread. But if it's on Fallen Divinity, it's an 8-inch bubble. So all friendly regiments of 6 or less stands, I should say, within 8 inches get dread. Dread means that your opponent cannot be inspired. So enemy regiments in contact with a regiment with a special rule cannot benefit from the inspired special rule. In instances where it's always inspired, this rule is superseded. So what's nice about this, especially early on, when you're worried about people charging into you and doing damage, they're not going to get the inspired bonus. Also, this helps support everyone else within 8, because if people hit them, they're not getting their bonuses. It also means they can't just choose to inspire then swing. So they're really losing out a lot on what they're getting as some of their bonuses. For me, I don't want to say auto-include, but if I can spare 40 points, if I can find it, I put it on. And usually when I build a list with her, I put it on there first, and then if there's a super great reason, I'll take it off. Otherwise, I consider her almost 340. Because dread in an 8-inch bubble is huge. Remember, she's going to be, after she gets to at least tier 2, she's going to be frontline. She's going to be in the middle. You're going to have other units around her, and the enemy's going to be either coming at her, or you're going to be rushing towards them. Removing inspired from people is really going to lower their output. In some factions, your stats tend to be somewhat low, and the inspired is really what gets you to sort of that even point. Remember, if you're anyone else, you can always take that as an action. We're not allowed to, but every other faction can. So I do feel that they're kind of pointed and put with that as an idea in mind. There is some other things she's technically allowed to take. She's technically allowed to take Eternal Discipline, which makes her untouchable. You get to reroll 6s on defense. That is useful. I don't care about it quite as much. Reason being, Dread lowers the hits they'll get anyway, which saves me to an extent. It only affects this one model because it's just, in that regiment. And by the time I'm probably getting her to combat with the things that I do, she probably has the better defense that the rerolling 6s isn't quite as important. In tier 1 it would be, but I'd rather put dread on people. However, I'm not going to say it's a bad idea if you went for that anyway. Bodyguards is absolutely useless, which you can take. Lonely Lineage, absolutely useless. When we get to combat blessings, there's only really 2 that she's even allowed to take because of different restrictions. 2 she's allowed to take. She can take Exposed Weakness, which just means if it's a duel, enemy characters can't ignore or reduce the number of hits that get suffered. It's 20 points of useless, don't bother with that. At higher levels, people aren't going to duel you, and at lower levels, you don't have things that are going to be reducing or removing them anyway. So that's not a thing. The character may have some things that do it, but if you're super low level, you're not really worried about winning those sort of things. If you're worried about their super crazy challenge character, ignore them. don't go near them. Your hits aren't going to be necessarily what take them out when you're tier 1. Because they're fine with that trade. Even if they do. Let's say they put, it could be anyone into your, say, a Blooded, a Conagir, something like that. Something where you can really up some stat blocks for. They'd be fine with that trade. I'll lose my character for you to lose your 300-point beat stick. I'm fine with that. So exposed weakness isn't going to help you. Implacable can, though. So Implacable gives you break their lines. Keep in mind that as Old Dominion, we're not allowed to take the Inspire action. So she starts at Cleave 1. She gets to, essentially Cleave 2, Cleave 3, all of that. But break their lines means if you're already stuck in combat, you can then do the action for line breaker. So if you're stuck in with someone that you're not going to get through otherwise, and they have bastions and shields and good defense, this is a way to remove those bonuses, which means even at early stages, even at tier 1, or probably more especially at tier 2, you will be cutting through everyone that you see. At tier 3, you don't really need the help. But the 20 points here, I have found reasons to take. I don't take it as often because, again, I'd rather have the dread. But if I had a spare 20 I have nothing to do with, or if I just want to experiment around with some list ideas, I do like that option. I do think it's a later choice that you take, or if you, say, can't fit the dread in, just because of points you don't have it, I will take this. Because early on, this is going to be something that you need to help get through and get the kind of damage you need down to survive out. Even at later stages, nothing wrong with it. Because remember, you might be Cleave 3, but if someone has shields and Bastion is on a very good defense, now you can absolutely cut through them. So it's not a bad option. All right, that's the baseline of her. I want to talk about some ways she gets supported, and then I want to talk about some list ideas. Things that can support her. Like I said, one, she has to be your Warlord. So we don't worry about any of the supremacy abilities, anything like that matters. Archimandrite's ability to heal is always useful. So I don't mind, especially early on, if I'm worried about this model getting hurt, healing up a few wounds can absolutely make a difference. Although your heals will be less focused, because your heal's dependent upon your dark power pool, she depends upon the Fallen Pantheon pool. Your Hierodeacon is always a great pickup for this, because your Hierodeacon, so I'll pull up the Hierodeacon for anyone watching. I'll talk my way through this, of course, always. You have Dark Supplication, so you can put 1 power token in either pool if you get this to go off. I do feel for Fallen Divinity, if you're going to run it, you need to get to the highest power you can as fast as you can. I like taking a Hierodeacon, especially in a unit of Cultists. Now, I know you'd have to proxy that, so we'll talk about, say, tournament lists a little bit later. But if I'm, playing for fun, I can play what I want. I like it in a unit of Cultists. I like getting both of them in turn 1, so that way I can start upping my power. And then next turn, when someone else walks on the board, I can start taking down stands to up that power even more. You have to get to a pretty high level to start getting your bonuses, but even more so. Because again, your Strategos has ways to get to the higher power early if you want. Your other units, they'll get to it just by pushing forward. When this model's included, you're going to have less units in general. You're probably taking some of the mainstays with her, which are expensive options. So you might not have all the stands that you need or would want to be able to sacrifice the same sort of way. The Hierodeacon can sacrifice little bits rather than, full regiments that you might be trying to throw to the wolves otherwise. And with that, it means if you can get it to tier 2, now you can play. Tier 1, like I said, is reasonably bad. Get to tier 2, now you can actually get some business done. So I do like that as an option. The other characters, I think it just depends on list choice because they don't really benefit the Fallen Divinity in any way. Not realistically, other than the other types of units that they can bring, because their special abilities and things like that aren't really going to do much for her, at least not the way that I see it. There might be some that can affect regiments depending on some of the bonuses you take, but I don't see that much. All right, so that gives us a bit about the Divinity itself. What I want to get into now then is I want to get into some actual list building with this. All right, for list building, so again, if you're not watching, I'm going to talk our way through it. But if you aren't watching, this might not be quite as interesting, this particular part. maybe right before it, just in case you don't want to go through the list building part, I will talk about some sort of final thoughts, and then we'll get to the list building. You have to protect her at tier 1. You absolutely have to be very safe with her. I do think her coming on early is fine. She's reasonably slow. You can keep her away from the enemies early on. I think you need to support her with units that become a big threat early, so that way the opponent can't just dedicate to her. So what I mean by that, if all you have, say early on the board, is, some just units of things like, cultists, or let's go into just taking a look at some other sorts of things. Looking at, sorry, let me do it this way. There you go. If all you have is, say, things like units of cultists, units of legionnaires, and things like that, or Moroi, or cares, that means this will probably become the focus. You need some things that they're going to worry about. Not that those things can't be a thing, but I think Kataphraktoi, I think Karyatids, especially in the medium slots, are really good options, because your Kataphraktoi can get in close, so that can, and with their speed, they can head off the unit that's coming to try and take her down. Your Karyatids can start putting the long-range fire support down, and I said they only really want to get to tier 2, so they're not as concerned with that for themselves. They're not a unit that needs to get that much higher. Same thing with Kataphraktoi. They really like to be tier 2, but you do have some options. Say if you're running Archimandrite, count them as tier 2 for the turn that you need. Get some power into them. I think you absolutely want those sort of options with her. I think if she's your big heavy hitter, I don't think you need a lot of other big heavy hitters outside of what she can take. So if you want to take a unit of Buccephaloi, I think you could do that. You want to take a unit of Kanephors, I think you can do that. I don't think you need things like Varangian Guard, because she'll serve the same sort of purpose. I think you can avoid, probably if you're doing that, you can avoid Strategos and Ziliarchs unless you really want them for some reason, because she supplies heavy hitters and she doesn't need the extra. I might take one, depending on which one. I'm much more likely to take the caster types with her personally, but we'll take a look at some other options. Protect her early. When she gets higher, go and throw her at people. She's great to sit on objectives, especially to be on that one objective where you are then in striking distance of other people, because she could score it for you, and then rush to go take someone down. Because you should be able to take them down without much effort, realistically, it shouldn't be protracted combat unless they're a giant unit. You're probably really crippling the unit in about one swing. That means the following turn, take them down, push on to the next objective, or line yourself up well for the next spot. People will greatly struggle to deal with it if it gets to that late game. That means you want to be cagey early, or you can also use that to draw them into bad positions, so that way you can hit them on flanks, hit them in rears, get the right charges on them, whatever it is, those sort of pieces that you want. So, having said all that, now we're actually going to go to a little bit of the list building. So, if nothing else, then you have some ideas on this, but now I want to get to some list building with this lady here. And again, I know they're reasonably amorphous things. I like to call her lady. So we're building at 2,000 points, because let's assume it's a normal big game, although I will say when I was playing a league, we played 750 matches. Her unit Kanephors, Karyatids with like an upgrade for her fits very nicely in 750. Was a lot of fun. I can't say it was fun for everyone else, but it was a lot of fun for me. As I said with her, for this, actually, I will resize the window. Okay, so I said with this, one has to be your Warlord. Okay, we'll snap that. For the Dark Blessings, I like Aura Malice. That is sort of my goal. I want to take Aura Malice here. If I'm taking her, I do want to take one of the units that she is good with. Like I said, for this, let's assume for the moment a proxy allowed list for a second, so you can just take units because it's fun, plus where you're going to get to, and then we'll talk about what changes I would make if I couldn't run that way. For her, what I've been liking lately is, like I said, Karyatid unit, and maybe a unit of Buccephaloi as well. So they're my bigger heavy hitters as well. Them, I'm going to up them by a stand. So I'm going to take a 4-pack of those. I usually take them in 4s. I usually can't afford any more. For other warbands, I want a Hierodeacon. I want the Hierodeacon because I want to be able to take, so I'll put it in Cultists, I want to be able to use Dark Supplication. All right, so with that then for the moment, for Retinue, I know it's a little bit off screen, but Retinue, I'm going to take at least tier 1 because I want that extra die. What I really care about is the tier 3, getting a lot of success, but if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So maybe putting those in, depending on what we're able to afford. A P3 pack of Cultists is fine, because the Hierodeacon's goal is not to get close. Don't care if it gets close. Don't care if those Cultists ever throw whatever their slings or whatever their stupid weapon is. Doesn't matter to me whatsoever, really. For this, that's about what I take for the Hierodeacon. If levels get higher enough, the Dark Supplication will matter, but Black Flame Dark Supplication always matters. The Black Flame Corrugation won't really matter so much. For this army, you want to take things that are okay with, say, maybe getting to Dark Power Tier 2, because that's about probably as good as you're going to get if you really want to get her up. One of the things I didn't say before, and I'll say it here, if you're running her, your goal is to power her up. The army needs to support her, not the other way around. The reason being, your Dark Power pool, 1, you're not allowed to take it to 4 no matter what. Also, you're not going to get it to 3. If you want her to 3, you might be able to get Dark Power to 2. And the way you're going to do that is with things like the Hierodeacon and getting Fallen Divinity out turn 1 so your Blasphemous Soma can start going off. If she's on the board turn 1, that means in a 10-turn game, she'll be able to get to tier 2, technically her own by the end of the game, because she'll gain 9. Your Hierodeacon coming in turn 1, because remember, you get 1 auto choice. She has flank, so she's an auto choice as well. That means your Hierodeacon could get you about, let's say you don't pass all of them, let's say 8. So you're looking at 16, 17 Dark Power total. That means you can at least get to tier 2. You could, with then one thing dying across the game, guarantee her be at tier 3. You can definitely do that. It's tough to get both of them up a bit. 2 and 2 is kind of good, but putting her to 3 is almost a necessity. So when I look at the list, I don't want to look at any units that want to be inspired or need to be inspired. If they're fine not being inspired, so Buccephaloi are fine. They're on cleave 3. When they charge in, they'll be on 4s, but the rest of the time, 3s is pretty good. I wouldn't want to take things like Bone Golems, because Bone Golems are only on 2s. If they don't have the inspired, they're really missing, and I can guarantee you won't get to tier 3. If you get her to tier 3, so I should say, you won't get the Dark Power pool to tier 3. If she is at tier 3, so if the Fallen Pantheon is tier 3, then she's given inspired out, but you're taking 4 wounds at the end of activations, and that can really start to hurt. So I don't want to play that as a strategy. For any other regiments I would take for this, I've already taken some of my specials. I would take more if I wanted to. Otherwise, we're looking at, again, the Centaurs if you want. I tend not to, just personally right now. You could be looking at maybe some Legionnaires. For other things I want, I do like Archimandrites in general. I am a big fan of the list option for them where you have, resizing the window, where you have the Hierodeacon doing damage to one of your units, usually to the unit the Archimandrite's in. So I'll take an Archimandrite. I'll take it with a unit of Legionnaires. All right, so the Archimandrite's Legionnaires units has the Dark Shepherd remove a stand. Then the Archimandrite puts the stand back. And I have them go as a 1-2. I can sometimes have them go early, so that way it's a nice delay tactic. I'm getting something done, but I get to see what you do first. I really like that because that means the Hierodeacon realistically is getting me 2 Dark Power a turn, which means with the Fallen Divinity on the board, that's 3 a turn. Now we're really starting to move numbers. For the Archimandrite, I honestly pretty much always take all 3 tiers, and I absolutely love taking, Dark Blessing, the Unholy Mastery, because I want to heal and then something else. The heal's necessary, but I want something else. All right, we're at 1345. So from here, other options I would take a look at then. And again, this is my sort of thought process. To me, this is a good basis I like to go with. From here, your Archimandrite does have some options. You could, like I said, I wouldn't go for Bone Golems, but if you want some other mediums, you could take more Legionnaires. You're going to need to stand on objectives. You could take a unit then of Praetorians. I wouldn't go Bone Golems. I don't think you're going to get enough out of them. Moroi aren't bad because they're very reasonably fast, high level of attack sort of unit. Praetorians to be able to go sit on objectives a little stronger are good. I wouldn't mind just more Legionnaires for cheapness, just so that way I have some cheaper fodder. For Anything else I would take with the Hierodeacon? Assassins are fine if you want to lean into units that aren't technically out right now. Me, since I'm leaning to this, probably not. If you have more units for Karyatids or Kanephors, I think that's not a bad play. I wouldn't mind taking another unit of Karyatids to be able to hit people from a distance, or maybe even a unit of Kanephors. Otherwise, sorts of things that I might look at. If you're happy with that, you're fine. If not, I might take something like a Strategos just to be able to, let's see what sort of things I can do with him. He can take a unit of either Legionnaires or Athanatoi, depending on which one, but to be able to take a unit of Kataphraktoi. I enjoy unit Kataphraktoi. I would put them to 4. Now, depending on how you like to run your Kataphraktoi, I think you put the standard bearer no matter what. But for the officers, that's really on you. I like the Hierodeacon. I like what the Hierodeacon does. Getting the memories of old isn't tough because you have the Archimandrite to be able to count them as tier 2. And it's not unheard of that later in the game that you actually could have your dark power pool be at tier 2. But I think you absolutely want that because this is a unit that if you can count them as tier 2, even for that one turn, will do you a lot of good. For the unit that will go with them, you could go cheap with more Legionnaires. Athanatoi, I kind of like with him. And I don't mind the Athanatoi where they are. Maybe standard bearer Athanatoi, officers. I probably wouldn't bother with either of them. No, I don't know. Princeps, making them always inspired is pretty good. I could get an extra stand. I'm at 4 stands now. That gives me 20 points of play. With those 20 points of play, I could then... I did talk about that upgrade on her. If you're really wanting to lean into her, lean into it, give it a shot, try to put everything into where you can. If not, with that little bit, I'd probably give the Strategos something. A retinue regalia tier 1 is a nice option because that means your command stand gets +2 attacks. Your Athanatoi are there just to blender units that just will go down to weight of attacks and all. I wouldn't bother with the combat. I might consider a treasure, but again, I'm kind of keeping that somewhat cheap. I'm not quite as concerned about that. Maybe what I would do, probably one of those. If not, maybe Hierodeacon, an extra in the retinue. But if not, yeah, maybe a treasure. What's a good treasure? Armor of the Living Saint. Not bad for that. What else could you get for 20? The Blade of Calsor, give cleave, extra attack and cleave. You naturally have 4 attacks, no cleave, so getting the extra bit could absolutely do you some good stuff. Dark Blessings. No, I don't know if it really needs any of that. Bodyguards doesn't need. Already has bodyguards with you not putting it in. Don't need any extra upgrades. You know what? I think that's fine. If we're leaning into the crazy, yeah. Let's just lean into the Implacable as well, or Expose Weakness. Which one was it? I always forget which name is which. Sorry, Implacable, yeah. So, is this a great list? I don't think it's a bad list, but I don't think it's necessarily a great and wonderful list. I think it has some good strengths. I think it leans into what she does with giving you some good options. I think the Hierodeacon Archimandrite pairing is really nice, because I think that pairing is going to really help put your power fast so you can get here to tier 2. Once I'm at tier 2, then I'm going to think about the rest of the army and what I need. Do I really need to get to a higher tier for my Karyatids, my Buccephaloi, my Kataphraktoi? If so, then I'm going to swap over and start upping the other one, because I can up it realistically, assuming they're also doing some killing, in about 2-3 rounds. In 3 rounds, I can almost guarantee it. I can potentially get it in 2 rounds if they're hurting me as well. So I think that is an option. So I will put the lists below as well for anyone who's watching on YouTube or anything like that. But overall, I do like this as a list. I do think it has some good options. The way I would play this list, like I said, she's coming in early. Hierodeacons also come in as a late unit early, and their goal is just to gain power. Next turn, Archimandrite's my requirement. I'm going to roll for a whole bunch more mediums, and I'm going to hope for at least one of them. If I do, it's the Kataphraktoi who are going to come in, and they're going to start threatening someone. I'm going to be using my trick back and forth to start upping my power pool, so I have plenty of power to be able to work with. As that goes up, once she hits Fallen Pantheon 2, now she'll start benefiting the units around her. Now that's the time when Buccephaloi starts showing up. That's the time when the Kataphraktoi and Athanatoi start coming into people. And when they do, now they're at +1 attack each. If I can get it to tier 3, they're always going to be inspired. They'll take some damage, but I'm going to use those other units as cleanup, as to finish things off. I don't want to be protracted sitting next to her. The other big thing is she could always walk away if I don't feel I need it. So this list overall, I do like. The Karyatids for long-range support, they can come in pretty early or along the side. She can push forward slowly until you start getting close to tier 2. Then I start moving much faster. And then like I said, once she's at tier 2, now you have a choice. You can figure out which way you kind of need to lean. You want her at tier 3 at some point, but depending on the type of army, if the army you're facing isn't a super fast-moving army, you might be able to wait a little bit and put a little bit of power into the other pool to give yourself that option of diversification. Like I said, with the 2, you can still get it pretty quick. It's not unheard of. It might be tough, and especially with this, with the number of stands we have with our healing ability, especially with the Archimandrite, you have a couple units that the Archimandrite can heal up fully. And by fully, I mean to gain a stand back. So like an Athanatoi or 4 wounds. Remember, your heal is 1 plus the dark power pool. Your dark power pool at base is going to essentially be 1 most of the game, which means you're healing 2. So things with 4 wounds are good because you bring stands back. So I can bring a stand back of those. I can bring a stand back of Kataphraktoi. We have stands back of Legionnaires, Cultists. The only thing you can't do is the 2 big ones, the Karyatids, the Buccephaloi, and you can help the Fallen Divinity a little bit. If you can get to tier 2 with it, now you can bring a stand back of anything, which bringing your stands back definitely greatly increases your ability to up this power level. This one plays probably her for tier 2, probably dark power for close to tier 2, and then maybe end game, she's sitting at tier 3 right near the end and just monstering her way through anything else. So this is one option. Overall, I do like this option. Maybe not the best, but I think it's fun. I think her list can be oppressive sometimes to some people. This list to me wouldn't be oppressive. All right, this second list I'm going to make is if you don't do proxies with her. Now, again, there's a variety of options, and this is going to be very similar to one that actually won something not too long ago. Actually, might have been a little bit ago from now, but we talked about it before. I'm going to start with her again, and yeah, she's got to be the Warlord, and I'm absolutely going to put Aura Malice. I said I like having Aura Malice. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to take some Kanephors and some Karyatids. And then what I want to do is, again, I want a Hierodeacon. Now, Dark Shepherd's not going to happen nearly as much because I might not be taking the other option for that. But, so Archimandrites to be able to heal because Dark Shepherd doesn't help as much if you can't heal the wounds back. It's not bad, but it just doesn't help as much. Resize my little window there. But we're going to put in a unit of Legionnaires. I said I would prefer Cultists, and if you can take Cultists, do so. But let's assume for a second that you can't. Also, with the other list, I should say, other upgrades you could do, your Legionnaires could take banners, and those banners to help give you more power if you destroy a unit. Well, with that, then, I can take another unit of, say, Karyatids. If you really want to lean into what some people were doing lists like this, Dark Supplication is allowed to be repeated. So what you could is you could lean really, actually, let me just do it this way. You could lean really hard into this, and you could just do the same thing all over again. Remember, you're allowed up to 2 copies of the heroes. You're actually allowed up to 8 copies of the units. It used to be 6, I think, but now it's actually 8. So you are now at 1550. With this, then, you could look at your Legionnaires if you're not worried about destroying them, because there's nothing that doesn't say the Hierodeacon doesn't hurt its own units. If that's the case, then you could absolutely take your Icon Bearer. Remember, when that stand with the icon, which would be your command stand, so the last stand gets removed, you get an extra dark power. There is options for your Hierodeacon to be able to get even more. There it is. It's the Dark Blessing Viectum. Viectum just says that when the Hierodeacon stand completely destroys a friendly regiment, with the Dark Shepherd, you gain an additional power. So you'll gain even more that you normally have. So that's also an option. What you could do then, depending on what you want to do, is you could just add in more individual stands of, say, Legionnaires, say like another base one. That one that she's not going to go in will take an icon, because now I can on both of them fully go after that unit. That unit's now going to be worth 5 points for me. And what this list is wanting to do, and we still have some points to play with, what you might then I have those Karyatids. Maybe we would add in a unit of, unit Kanephors. What a list like this usually wants to do is you want to be taking more minimum type squads. The reason you're looking a little bit more minimum is because you need board presence. So this list is trying to go for a lot of board presence. This list is trying to look for opponents to be destroying different units, and it's looking to only care about buffing her. So you won't necessarily have the memories of old on your Kanephors or your Karyatids. You don't care about it on your Legionnaires whatsoever. At least for my list, I don't think this matters at all. So they might not get those bonuses, but they're still going to do you a lot of good. That's also why, if instead you wanted, you could swap out one of these and put a unit Buccephaloi in, because those Buccephaloi, not quite as concerned. Again, it would help them, of course, but it's not quite as big of an issue there. And if one of them truly matters, remember, you get it as you can still use them. Remember, you still, pulling this back here, you can still use Memories Old as an action. Tier 2 just means it's a draw event instead. So if you really do need one of these bonuses, you could absolutely take it depending on what it is or what quarter thing you're looking at. So if you really need that fluid formation, you could do the Memories of Old action, so that way then you can be shooting around in different whatever way you want and all of that if enemies are behind you. So that might still be a decent option for you. For the last 110 that I have, since it wouldn't fit an extra unit of any of these, I would probably just buff up one or two of these units. What I might do then, a few different choices. I could just up in the Legionnaires. Hierodeacons, let's give them both at least tier 1. I want them to be Retinue tier 1 or Arcane tier 1 because I want that extra die. From there, got 80 points left. I would probably take one of these units of Kanephors, pop them up to a 4-pack. Now I got spare 10 points. That lets me take one of these other Legionnaire units and put another icon in it. So now I have 2 units with icons. Both of those can go down, and I'm happy for them to end up going down. They can get me all the more power. I have Kanephors and Karyatids to be able to do my weightlifting for me. I have 3 different units of Karyatids, so good amount of shots out to 20 inches. Can really start putting some strain on people. Good amount of other medium options. I have a decent amount of Legionnaires to go sit on objectives. The Karyatids can sit on objectives as well. Later in the game, I have these units of Kanephors coming in. Hopefully I'm pretty far up the field, which means now my Kanephors can come in pretty far up. They can now be my second line. And this list only cares about the Divinity up to that tier 3. Realistically, you could probably get the tier 3 if your Hierodeacons are going reasonably well for you by turn 4. Tier 2 by turn 4. If we're not assuming they're killing you at all, be like probably turn 6 to get to tier 3. But if they're hurting you at all, you could get it in terms of, say, turn 4 or so, or 5. Probably more realistically 5. If you have that in terms of turn 5, when their heavies have really just started to hit the board. I know your heavies can come in turn 3, but a lot of heavies really don't start getting into the fight until really turn 5. Now this thing can go and hunt down any of them that you care about. You have your Kanephors to back any of that up, and your Karyatids have softened up any targets that you are going into your Legionnaires, or that would have threatened your Fallen Divinity early. The list that did really well essentially was this. It just leaned almost exclusively into Kanephors and Karyatids kind of thing. To me, I think this is a nice way to do it. It's a little more spammy than I personally like, but for things that are out, I think this is an option. For me, if I took that last list, and if I can't take Cultists, I'm fine taking Legionnaires. I'll swap a little bit out to save that 20 points. I'll take the upgrade off. I'm still okay with the list. I just don't like it as much because I want to get that power a little faster. But this one still works pretty well because starting turn 2, you can really start getting a lot of power going very fast with these 2 units of Hierodeacons. All right. that gives us some base ideas. If you're running her, my suggestions overall, lean into the fact that it has to be a very different list. Lean into lists that you haven't tried before. Don't just try to substitute her into one of your current lists. Build around her. Try something very different. If you're like me and you usually run a Strategos, don't put any Strategos with her. Or maybe put a Zilliarch with her. Or hey, your Strategos doesn't get those other abilities. Maybe try some different units. Try out some stuff, because I think you're going to be surprised at what you can do. If you're wanting to run her, I think Kanephors, Karyatids, Buccephaloi are necessities. I think you should at least lean into 2 out of 3 of those. This list leaned into this, but I easily could have swapped one out, put some Buccephaloi in instead, and still had a great day. If you're not going to run any of those specials with her, I don't think you're going to get as much out of her. I don't think it's going to be as enjoyable. I think if you're taking this, I think you want to take the things that she does. And these are the sorts of things that she does. So grab a few of those boxes as well. Really lean into this as a list. Try it out. See what you like. All right. That gives us some lists. That gives us an overview of her, sort of my thought process on her, what I like to see, what I want to run her like. If you've used her, say so if you're watching on YouTube, say so in the comments below. If you're not watching on YouTube, hop over to YouTube, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And also then leave below, if you run her, what you like, what you don't. If you don't like running her, or if you face her and you have suggestions of things that you try to do to stop her or stay away from, or if you run her, what you like to do, I'm really interested to see what people do and what sort of thoughts they have. I think she can be exceptionally strong for us. I think she can also be a fun piece. And if you're playing in a spot where people are like, oh, not her again, and they're really not enjoying it, you can do some of those shenanigans, but push more towards the other dark power pool instead of the Fallen Pantheon. Because if you only get her to say tier 2, she's strong but not oppressive. Tier 3, she starts to get oppressive. Especially if someone's brand new, they might not realize how fast they need to deal with her. I've had people do that, where I explain to her what they do. Here's what this model does. But if they don't truly grasp it, I've had this model run roughshod across their army because they just weren't ready for it. So you do have to be ready for this kind of model. All right, so what to expect after this video. I still owe you people a couple of videos related to why each faction is the greatest ever. 100 King's the next one. I might actually be recording that, probably not later tonight, but maybe even tomorrow. So you should see that, depending on when this shows up, later that week, maybe the week after. I'm going to be putting out quite a bit of this content early January, because I can record a bunch of it right now. I'm hoping to get back to doing some battle reports, although that just gets a little bit tougher, especially some health things that are going on, both for me and some other people. My legs don't have just, I guess, sciatica or something like that. They've been screaming, and Dan's have been doing that for quite some time. And then Steve lives up in New York, so it's a little bit tougher. But the hope is to maybe not early January, but early February, do another tournament at one of the local stores, so that way it can show off there. There's some other stores I go to for tournaments. I just don't know if I can realistically record out of it with things that are going on, but I'm going to talk to them, and I might give that a shot, because I'd like to be able to get some more battle reports out of this stuff. For other things, I do want to get into the other armies. As always, let me know what you want to see, what you want to hear about, and I'll put that in. Remember, if you are wanting to pick up this or anything else for Conquest, we do have our code, Terrain Kickers, and we have a link below in show notes that gives you the link to go to. Go to that, put in our code, you'll save 10%. We get a little something out of it as well. Helps everyone. Win-win situation. All right, I think I belabored all the points in what is now one of the longer Conquest videos that I've done. So, on behalf of everyone here at the show, then, have a good hobbying, it's a great gaming.